Breen assault on Zephyr Colony left almost all the defenders shitting their pants in terror, except for the humans. The attack was sudden and savage. Patrick Carter was a battle-hardened human soldier protecting the frontier colony when the warlike Breen aliens descended on Zephyr like a swarm of murderous locusts. Their leader was Kairos, a brutal commander known for conquering worlds and slaughtering civilians. The alien onslaught paralyzed most of the colony's inhabitants and security forces with abject fear. Breen troops swiftly smashed through the human defenses, armed with advanced weapons tech and elite shock troops. Massive xeno-warships pounded the colony's cities from orbit, leveling entire districts. But amidst the flames and rubble, Patrick moved into action. He rallied a ragtag bunch of human survivors and convinced them to fight back, even against terrible odds. Patrick told them that giving into fear would seal their doom. So this improvised militia launched desperate hit-and-run attacks on the overconfident Breen bastards who thought Zephyr was already under their boot. The stakes couldn't be higher. If the Breen took Zephyr, they'd have a perfect staging base to invade other human systems. Patrick's tiny resistance cell knew they might be all that stood in the way of humanity's annihilation. In a bold gambit, Patrick volunteered to lead a near-suicidal mission to infiltrate and sabotage the Breen command ship hovering over the colony. Success might cripple the aliens' ability to coordinate their forces and stall them long enough for human reinforcements to get here. But if Patrick was captured, it could expose the resistance and wipe out any hope of free Zephyr from the Xenos. Right before the infiltration op, Patrick uncovered a shocking secret. Zephyr wasn't just some minor colony, but a classified military research installation developing a new superweapon that could change everything. The prototypes were stashed somewhere in the besieged colony. Now both Patrick and Kairos were in a brutal race to find the game-changing tech first. Gripped by fear but determined to go down swinging, Patrick and his outgunned band of rebels grimly prepped for a final stand against the alien invaders. The fate of Zephyr, and maybe all humanity, hung in the balance. Meanwhile, Kairos turned the ruined colony upside down to find the hidden human WMDs, knowing they could be the key to the Breen Imperium conquering the human sphere of space. As the human resistance dug in for a bloody last stand against the Breen onslaught, hope seemed lost. But then a glimmer of opportunity emerged from an unlikely source. Orcs, a renegade Breen engineer sickened by Kairos's brutal warmongering. Orcs arranged a clandestine meeting with Patrick and revealed tantalizing intel. There's a hidden vulnerability in the Breen command ship's defenses, Orcs disclosed in hushed tones. A small team could breach the hull here and sabotage the power core, crippling the entire vessel. Patrick's eyes narrowed. Could this Xeno be trusted? But what choice did they have? He quickly assembled a crack squad of his best shooters and demo experts. The most crucial role went to Mike Boomer Thompson, Patrick's closest buddy and a wizard with explosives. Blending in with a Breen supply shuttle, Patrick's commandos infiltrated the alien dreadnought, ducking patrols of the ship's twitchy security forces by inches. Deeper they crept through twisting corridors, engaging in bursts of vicious close quarters, fighting with squads of heavily armed Breen troopers. The team finally reached the central power core, but it was heavily fortified and crawling with Kairos's deadliest goons under the command of Thrak, his most savage enforcer. Vicious close-range gun battles erupted with the outnumbered humans pushed to the brink. Ammo ran low, and casualties mounted until all seemed lost. Then, Boomer made the ultimate sacrifice. Realizing the core was too well defended to blow from a distance, he sprinted straight into the teeth of the enemy guns, explosives in hand, as Patrick screamed for him to stop. Boomer rammed the charges directly into the core housing and detonated them manually, destroying the power systems in a blinding flash as return fire ripped into him. Patrick was forced to leave his friend's shattered body behind as warning klaxons wailed and the dying ship shook itself apart. As the dreadnought fell burning from the sky, Kairos flew into a barbaric rage. He ordered every Breen trooper to converge on Zephyr in an all-out attack to slaughter the colony before the humans could recover. Hundreds of troop transports spilled from orbiting ships, and disgorged thousands of murderous alien soldiers who threw themselves at the colony's crumbling defenses. The Breen crashed into the human lines like a tidal wave, and all-out chaos erupted. Savage street-to-street fighting raged through the blood-soaked colony as Patrick's militia battled the invaders hand-to-hand with rifles, knives, and even rocks and clubs. Human and Breen bodies soon carpeted the rubble-strewn ground. In the midst of the whirlwind of violence, urgent word reached Patrick that a scout team had discovered the location of the secret cache of human superweapons, an experimental arms bunker on the outskirts of the colony. Heart-pounding, Patrick fought his way through the hurricane of blood and flames, racing to secure the cache before Karos's troops could reach it. Reaching the bunker entrance, Patrick's stomach dropped. The outer blast doors hung open, twisted and burned, and inside stood Zorux, alongside a strike force of Breen elites. The turncoat engineer met Patrick's gaze with a contemptuous sneer, a cache of human WMD prototypes visible behind him. Zorux had played them all for fools. Patrick's grip tightened on his rifle as he faced off with the traitor, the fate of Zephyr, and perhaps humanity itself, hanging by a thread. Above them, the ragged remnants of the human resistance fought savagely to hold back the alien tide, praying that Patrick would find a way to seize victory from the jaws of defeat before the light of hope was extinguished forever. Patrick stared down Zorux, his finger tightening on the trigger of his rifle. "Hand over the weapons," he growled. Zorux's mandibles clicked in amusement. "You humans are so predictable. Did you really think I'd betray my own kind for you primitives?" He gestured to the cache of experimental weapons behind him. "Karos will crush your pathetic species. But you have a choice, Patrick. Surrender now and live as our slaves, or die here with the rest of your doomed race." Patrick spat on the floor. "Go to hell." He lunged at Zorux, smashing the butt of his rifle into the alien's face. Zorux staggered back, but quickly recovered, lashing out with a vicious backhand that sent Patrick flying into a bank of computers. Sparks showered as Patrick crashed through the equipment. The two combatants traded brutal blows, Patrick's fists cracking against Zorux's exoskeleton. But the Breen's cybernetic enhancements gave him inhuman strength and speed. He caught Patrick's punch and twisted, snapping bones. Patrick howled in pain as Zorux lifted him by the throat. "Your species is weak," Zorux sneered, squeezing Patrick's windpipe. "The strong survive, the weak perish. That is the way of the universe." Patrick's vision blurred as he gasped for air. His hand frantically scrabbled along a nearby workbench, fingers closing around the grip of an unfamiliar weapon. With the last of his strength, he jammed it against Zorux's chest and pulled the trigger. A lance of blindingly bright plasma erupted from the barrel, burning straight through Zorux's body. The alien's eyes widened in shock as his chest cavity vaporized. He collapsed in a smoking heap, cybernetic implants sputtering and sparking. Patrick stumbled to his feet, plasma rifle in hand. He quickly secured the remaining prototypes, knowing they might be humanity's only chance. Emerging from the bunker, Patrick found his battered resistance fighters still locked in desperate combat with the Breen forces. He tossed weapons to his closest squad. "Use these! They pack one hell of a punch!" The effect was immediate. Blasts of superheated plasma cut through Breen armor without effort. Portable energy shields deflected incoming fire. For the first time since the invasion began, the humans were pushing the aliens back. Patrick led from the front, his plasma rifle leaving a trail of Breen corpses in his wake. "Push them back!" he roared over the din of battle. "Show these bastards what happens when they fuck with humanity." The tide of battle shifted. Breen troops fell by the dozens, their advanced tech no match for the experimental human weapons. In the midst of the chaos, a massive figure in gleaming battle armor strode onto the field. Karos himself had joined the fray. The Breen warlord's voice boomed across the battlefield. "Face me, human! Let us end this here and now!" Patrick stepped forward, plasma rifle at the ready. Karos hefted an enormous war axe crackling with energy. The two leaders circled each other as the battle raged around them. Karos struck first. his axe cleaving the air where Patrick's head had been a split second before. Patrick rolled and fired, the plasma blast scorching Karos's armor but failing to penetrate. They traded blows back and forth, Patrick's speed and agility barely keeping him ahead of Karos's crushing strength. But the human was tiring, his injuries taking their toll. Karos's axe caught Patrick in the side, sending him sprawling. The Breen warlord loomed over him. You fought well for a human, but in the end, you're still just prey. As Karos raised his axe for the killing blow, Patrick's hand closed around the hilt of his combat knife. With a surge of desperate strength, he plunged it into a gap in Karos's armor. The blade, wreathed in plasma energy from the experimental tech, burned through alien flesh and vital organs. Karos staggered back, black blood pouring from the mortal wound. His legs buckled and he crashed to the ground, armor sparking and smoking. The once mighty warlord lay still. A hush fell over the battlefield as both sides realized what had happened. Then the Breen ranks broke, alien soldiers fleeing in panic towards their ships. Patrick struggled to his feet, raising his bloodied knife high. "Drive them off our world," he bellowed. The humans surged forward, unleashing volleys of plasma fire into the retreating Breen. As the last enemy dropships lifted off, carrying the shattered remnants of the invasion force, a static-filled transmission came through on the colonial command frequency. Human reinforcements had arrived in system, drawn by Zephyr's distress call. Though outnumbered, they engaged the Breen fleet in orbit, buying time for the retreat. Patrick sank to his knees, exhaustion and pain finally overtaking him. But a fierce pride burned in his chest as he looked out over the ruined colony. Against impossible odds, they had held, they had survived, and they had struck a mighty blow against the alien menace that threatened all of humanity. As the last Breen ship vanished into the star-filled sky, Patrick knew this was only the beginning. The war for humanity's future had begun in earnest. But on this day, on this world, they had proven that humans would never go quietly into the night. They would rage against any force that threatened their existence, and they would endure. Triumph. But the euphoria was short-lived. Patrick stood in the war room, fists clenched as he absorbed the grim intelligence reports scrolling across the screens. What they'd faced on Zephyr was a mere fraction of the true Breen might. "Thousands of warships," General Hawthorne said, his voice heavy. "The main invasion force is already en route, led by Overlord Thrax himself." Patrick's blood ran cold. He'd heard whispers of Thrax's brutality, entire worlds left as barren husks in his wake. "Our conventional defenses won't hold against a force that size," Admiral Chen added. "We need a new strategy and fast." That's when Colonel Reeves stepped forward, laying out the audacious plan dubbed Operation Prometheus, a covert mission to the heart of Breen territory, their homeworld Krath. "We don't even know where Krath is," Patrick interjected. Reeves nodded grimly. "That's why we'll hitch a ride with the invasion fleet itself." The room fell silent as the full weight of the plan sank in. It was a suicide mission, plain and simple, but it was also humanity's only shot at survival. "I'm in," Patrick said without hesitation. Weeks of grueling preparation followed. Patrick trained alongside the hand-picked team, hardened soldiers, brilliant engineers, and cunning scientists. They drilled relentlessly, pushing their bodies and minds to the limit. Finally, the day of reckoning arrived. Using salvaged Breen tech and a daring ruse, they breached the hull of a massive enemy capital ship. Patrick's heart pounded as they crept through alien corridors, taking out sentries with ruthless efficiency. After a tense firefight in the bridge, they seized control of the ship's systems. Bodies of fallen Breen littered the deck as Patrick settled into the captain's chair, praying their deception would hold. For weeks they traveled with the invasion armada, every moment fraught with the possibility of discovery. Patrick barely slept, constantly on edge as they drew closer to the mysterious Breen homeworld. When Krath finally appeared on their view screens, a toxic-looking sphere of purples and greens, a surge of hope coursed through Patrick. They'd made it this far against all challenges. But their luck ran out. Alarms blared as the Breen detected their presence. "Abandon ship!" Patrick roared as enemy fire rocked the vessel. They raced for the escape pods, the ship disintegrating around them. Patrick was thrown violently as they plummeted towards the alien world, sirens wailing and G-forces crushing him into his seat. The pod slammed into Krath's surface with bone-jarring force. Patrick crawled from the wreckage, head spinning. Through the haze, he saw only 2 other pods had made it. The rest of the team was gone. Sergeant Vasquez and Dr. Emerson emerged, battered but alive. They huddled behind a rocky outcropping as Breen fighters screamed overhead, searching for survivors. "We're cut off, outnumbered, with no extraction plan," Vasquez said grimly. Patrick checked his gear and nodded towards the alien cityscape looming in the distance. "Then we'd better get moving. The fate of Earth depends on us now." With relentless drive, the trio set off across the harsh landscape. The air itself seemed to burn their lungs, and strange creatures skittered in the shadows. But there was no turning back. Humanity's last hope rested on their shoulders, and time was running out. Patrick's lungs burned as he sprinted across the alien terrain, his boots crunching on purple-hued gravel. The acrid air of Krath stung his eyes and throat. Behind him, Maria Flores and Jacob Hendricks struggled to keep pace, their breath coming in ragged gasps. "Move it!" Patrick barked, glancing over his shoulder. The distant sound of Breen energy weapons grew louder. They crested a hill, revealing a vast expanse of barren wasteland stretching to the horizon. Jagged rock formations jutted from the desolate landscape like the bones of some long-dead leviathan. "There!" Flores pointed to a rocky outcropping. "We can take cover there." The trio dove behind the rocks just as a Breen patrol crested the hill. Patrick's heart pounded as he pressed himself against the cool stone. He could hear the click-clack of Breen exoskeletons, the hum of their energy rifles. Hendricks fumbled with his weapon, hands shaking. Patrick clamped a hand over the engineer's mouth, silencing him. For agonizing minutes, they lay motionless as the patrol passed within meters of their hiding spot. As the sounds of the Breen faded, Flores's eyes widened. She gestured to the rock face beside them. Strange symbols were etched into the stone, lines and curves that seemed to form a crude map. "These markings," she whispered, "they're not natural." Patrick studied the etchings. "Resistance markers. Has to be." They followed the crude map, picking their way through a maze of razor-sharp rock formations. The alien sun beat down mercilessly, sapping their strength with each step. After hours of grueling travel, they reached a sheer cliff face. Patrick ran his hands over the rough stone, searching for any sign of an entrance. Hendricks slumped to the ground, exhausted. "There's nothing here. We're going to die on this godforsaken rock." Suddenly, a section of the cliff face shimmered and vanished, revealing a hidden entrance. Breen rebels emerged, weapons trained on the humans. "Don't move," a gravelly voice commanded. A female Breen stepped forward, her carapace scarred and pitted. "I am Krala. Why are you here?" Patrick slowly raised his hands. "We're here to help. We brought advanced human tech from Zephyr." Krala's compound eyes narrowed. "Prove it." Patrick nodded to Hendricks, who produced a compact plasma rifle. Krala examined it, mandibles clicking in approval. "Very well," she said. "Come inside, quickly." They entered a vast underground chamber filled with mismatched equipment and haggard-looking Breen. Krala led them to a strategy table covered in holographic displays. "We have an inside source," she explained. "A scientist named Zaros. He's been feeding us intel on Thrax's invasion plans." Patrick leaned over the table, studying the data. "This is incredible. With this information, we might have a chance." Krala nodded. "Zaros wants to meet. We can get you into the capital, but it's risky." "We'll take that risk," Patrick said firmly. Days later, disguised in salvaged Breen armor, they crept through the towering spires of the alien capital. Zaros met them in a secluded alley, his mandibles twitching nervously. "The bioweapon," he chittered. "It's unstable. Could destroy everything. I need your help to disable it." Before Patrick could respond, alarms blared throughout the city. Breen troops poured into the streets. We've been compromised, Kralla shouted. Get to the launch facility. I'll hold them off. Patrick hesitated, but Kralla shoved him forward. Go! Save your people! As they fled, Patrick heard the sound of Kralla's last stand echoing through the alien streets. They ran towards the coordinates of the launch facility, praying they weren't too late to stop the impending catastrophe. The acrid stench of burning circuitry filled Patrick's nostrils as he sprinted through the winding corridors of the Breen capital. Flores and Hendricks pounded the metal grating at his heels, their ragged breaths echoing off the alien architecture. The distant screech of Breen alarm klaxons spurred them onward. This way, Patrick hissed, consulting the holomap Kralla had uploaded to his wrist computer. They ducked into a narrow service tunnel, the walls slick with condensation. Hendricks stumbled, his face pale beneath a sheen of sweat. We can't keep this up much longer. We have to, Flores snapped, hauling the engineer to his feet. Billions are counting on us. They emerged onto a catwalk overlooking a vast industrial complex. In the center, a massive silo stood like a monolith of doom. Patrick's heart raced as he spotted the launch gantry. There's our target, he whispered. A Breen patrol marched along the perimeter. Patrick held up a closed fist, signaling a halt. They crouched in the shadows, hardly daring to breathe as the aliens passed below. Once clear, they rappelled down to the facility floor. Patrick led them to a maintenance hatch, where Hendricks made short work of the lock. They squeezed inside, crawling through cramped access tunnels until they reached the silo's inner chamber. The warhead loomed before them, a sleek cylinder dripping with malevolent potential. Hendricks immediately set to work, fingers flying across his portable terminal. Shit, he muttered. The firing controls are routed through a planet-wide defense grid. We can't disarm it from here. What are our options? Patrick demanded. We need to reach the main control room. It's the only place with full system access. A distant explosion rocked the facility. Flores readied her weapon. Then let's move. They know we're here. They fought their way through the complex, energy bolts sizzling past their heads. Patrick's muscles burned as he vaulted over fallen Breen, the stench of ozone thick in the air. Just as they neared the control room, a massive figure stepped into view. Overlord Thrax, his armor gleaming, blocked their path. A dozen elite guards fanned out behind him. Ah, the human vermin, Thrax's voice boomed. Did you really think we wouldn't anticipate your pathetic scheme? Patrick raised his weapon, but Thrax merely laughed. Your species is so predictable. We allowed you to penetrate this far, all to spring our trap. The Overlord's compound eyes glittered with malice. The warhead you seek is merely the first step. Soon your worlds will writhe in mutation, ripe for our taking. Thrax leveled a massive energy cannon at Hendricks. You will reactivate the launch sequence, human, then watch as your companions die. In that moment, Flores acted. She thumbed a detonator, triggering explosives they'd planted earlier. The blast sent Thrax's guards sprawling. Go! Flores screamed. Patrick grabbed Hendricks and dove for the control room. The reinforced door hissed shut behind them just as Breen soldiers opened fire. Inside, Hendricks frantically worked to override the launch protocols. Patrick's blood ran cold as the main view screen flickered to life, showing Flores in Thrax's clutches. Work faster, Patrick urged, his voice hoarse. But the controls fought them at every turn. Sabotaged failsafes and encrypted lockouts slowed their progress to a crawl. On the screen, Thrax began his brutal interrogation of Flores. Patrick's hands shook as he assisted Hendricks, forcing himself to focus on the task, even as Flores's screams echoed through the chamber. They were so close, the final override just out of reach. A gunshot rang out. Patrick looked up in horror to see Flores slump lifelessly to the ground, Thrax's weapon still smoking. No! Patrick roared. With renewed fury, he attacked the console. Lines of code blurred before his eyes as he input the final command sequence. Warning klaxons blared throughout the facility. On auxiliary screens, Patrick watched as the warhead's payload vented harmlessly into containment units. They'd done it. The immediate threat was neutralized. But as Patrick sagged against the console, the triumphant feeling was hollow. They'd been too slow. Even now, the Breen Armada was falling upon humanity's outer colonies, their audacious gambit having bought precious time for the invasion to begin. Ah! Patrick's eyes strained against the void as he peered through the shuttle's cracked viewport. The emergency lights cast an eerie red glow across the cramped interior, illuminating Hendrix's haggard face and the stasis pod containing their captive, Overlord Thrax. Life support's down to 12%, Hendrix reported, his fingers dancing across a sparking control panel. Nav system's barely functioning. We're flying blind out here. Patrick ran a hand through his sweat-matted hair. Any luck with those star charts? Hendrix shook his head. It's a mess. Half the data's corrupted. I might be able to cobble together a jump vector, but... Do it, Patrick ordered. We're dead if we stay here. As Hendrix worked, Patrick checked the stasis pod's readings. Thrax floated motionless within, his alien features frozen in a snarl. Their trump card, if they live long enough to use it. I've got something, Hendrix announced. It's risky as hell, but it's our only shot. Patrick nodded grimly. Punch it. The shuttle's engines whined in protest as Hendrix initiated the jump. Patrick gripped his seat as reality twisted around them, the stars blurring into streaks of light. For a heart-stopping moment, it felt like the battered craft would tear itself apart. Then, with a lurch that made Patrick's stomach heave, they emerged back into normal space. He blinked, trying to get his bearings. Holy shit, Hendrix breathed. Through the viewport, Patrick saw a massive array of warships, human warships. Before he could react, the comm crackled to life. Unidentified craft. You have entered a restricted military zone. Power down and prepare to be boarded. Patrick's hands shook as he keyed the response. This is Captain Patrick Hawthorne. We have critical intel on the Breen invasion. Request immediate assistance. A tense silence followed. Then a new voice, crisp and authoritative. Captain Hawthorne? This is Admiral Talia Singh. Stand by for docking procedures. Minutes later, Patrick stepped onto the gleaming deck of Singh's flagship. He swayed, his legs unsteady after so long in the cramped shuttle. A tall woman with close-cropped gray hair strode towards him, her uniform immaculate. Captain, Singh said, her eyes sharp. We thought you were dead. Report. Patrick took a deep breath and began his debrief. He recounted the mission to Krayath, the destruction of the bioweapon facility, and their narrow escape. Singh's expression grew darker with each word. And you have Overlord Thrax in custody? She asked. Patrick nodded. In stasis aboard our shuttle. He could be a valuable source of intelligence. Singh's teeth gritted. We'll need every advantage we can get. The situation is dire, Captain. We've lost contact with our outer colonies. The Breen advance seems unstoppable. She led Patrick to a holographic display, bringing up a star map. We've enacted the endgame protocol. Full evacuation of all human worlds to a single defensible position, Abaddon Prime. Patrick studied the harsh, rogue planet nestled deep within a treacherous star cluster. You really think we can hold out there? Singh's eyes flashed. We have to. But there's a complication. Intel suggests the Breen have developed a weapon capable of penetrating Abaddon's natural defenses. If they deploy it, then humanity's last refuge becomes a death trap, Patrick finished. He straightened, meeting Singh's gaze. What do you need me to do? We need that weapon, Captain. Stolen or destroyed. It's a suicide mission deep in Breen territory. Patrick nodded without hesitation. I'm in. Singh allowed herself a grim smile. I hoped you'd say that. Let's introduce you to your team. 3 figures approached. Hendrix, looking marginally more rested, gave Patrick a nod. Beside him stood a grizzled man with a cybernetic eye, his face a roadmap of scars. Zavala, the man grunted. I know Breen shipyards inside and out. The third member of the team swaggered forward, a cocky grin on his youthful face. Franklin Rhodes at your service. Best damn pilot this side of the galaxy. Patrick assessed his new squad, acutely aware of the monumental task before them. All right, people. We're headed into the heart of Breen territory. Our target is their anchorage at Tartarus. We find that weapon prototype and make sure it never sees the light of day. They boarded their stealth craft, a sleek vessel overflowing with experimental tech. As Rhodes fired up the engines, Patrick studied the schematics of their target. Layers upon layers of defenses stood between them and their objective. "Approaching jump coordinates," Rhodes announced. "Better hold on to something. This ride's about to get bumpy." Patrick gripped his harness as the stealth craft leapt into hyperspace. They hurtled towards Tartarus, towards the heart of the Breen war machine. One last, desperate gamble to save humanity from extinction. The craft shuddered as it tore through the fabric of space-time. Patrick's bones seemed to vibrate with the strain. Through the cockpit viewport, he watched reality twist and distort. Warp as the stealth craft burst into real space. The imposing silhouette of Tartarus filled the viewscreen, a monstrous construct of metal and malice. "Shields up," Patrick ordered. "Activate cloaking systems." Rhodes's fingers danced across the controls. "Cloaking engaged. We're invisible to their sensors. For now." The craft glided silently towards the anchorage, dodging automated defense platforms and roving patrols. Patrick's eyes scanned for weaknesses in the outer defenses. "There," Zavala grunted, pointing to a maintenance hatch. "That's our way in." With surgical precision, Rhodes maneuvered the craft alongside the hatch. The team donned their advanced camouflage suits, each movement causing a ripple of light as the adaptive technology adjusted. "Remember," Patrick whispered, "we're here for the particle weapon. In and out, no heroics." They cycled through the airlock and entered Tartarus. The maintenance shaft stretched before them, a claustrophobic tunnel of pipes and circuitry. They moved in silence, every step calculated. Emerging into a vast chamber, Patrick's breath caught in his throat. Colossal warships hung suspended in zero-G docks, swarms of worker drones scuttling across their hulls. Assembly lines churned out weapons of unimaginable destruction. "My God," Hendricks breathed, "it's a war factory." A squad of Breen soldiers marched past, mere inches from the cloaked infiltrators. Patrick held his breath, willing his hammering heart to quiet. They pressed deeper into Tartarus, navigating a maze of corridors and restricted zones. Each security checkpoint required split-second timing and nerves of steel to bypass undetected. Finally, they reached the high-security lab housing the particle weapon. Patrick's skin crawled as he gazed upon the sleek, malevolent device. "That's our target," he whispered. "Hendricks, prep the—" A bone-chilling screech cut through the air. Commander Thrask, a hulking mass of cybernetic augmentation and alien fury, stood at the far end of the corridor. "Intruders!" Thrask roared. Energy weapons erupted to life. "Scatter!" Patrick shouted. The team split, diving for cover as plasma bolts seared the air. Patrick and Zavala sprinted down one corridor, while Hendricks and Rhodes fled towards the lab. Alarms blared throughout Tartarus as Patrick and Zavala raced through the smelting decks. The acrid stench of molten metal filled their lungs. Thrask's heavy footfalls echoed behind them, closing fast. "We need a diversion," Patrick gasped. Zavala's cybernetic eye whirred. "The smelting vats. If we overload the cooling systems—" Patrick nodded. They skidded to a halt at a control panel. Zavala's fingers flew across the interface, bypassing fail-safes. A deafening roar filled the chamber as superheated metal burst from the vats. Thrask bellowed in rage as a wall of liquid fire separated him from his prey. "That won't hold him long," Zavala warned. They sprinted back towards the lab, praying they weren't too late. As they rounded the final corner, they found Hendricks and Rhodes pinned down by Breen shock troops. "The lab's sealed," Rhodes shouted over the din of weapons fire. "We can't get in." Patrick's mind raced. They were out of options, out of time. Then impossibly a familiar voice echoed in his mind. "Release me." Overlord Thrax's thoughts reverberated in Patrick's skull. "I can grant you access." Patrick hesitated, weighing the risks. Could he trust the alien warlord? But as another volley of plasma fire scorched the wall beside him, he realized they had no choice. "Do it!" he shouted to Hendricks. Hendricks tapped furiously at his wrist computer. In the distance, the stasis pod hissed open. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then the lab's security barriers flickered and died. The doors slid open with a pneumatic hiss. "Inside now," Patrick ordered. They dove into the lab, sealing the doors behind them. The particle weapon loomed before them, a technological terror beyond human comprehension. "We've got company incoming," Rhodes warned, eyeing the security feeds. Patrick's mind raced. Capture or destroy. The fate of humanity hung in the balance. And somewhere in the bowels of Tartarus, Overlord Thrax was free and plotting. Patrick's finger hovered over the detonator, his eyes locked on the particle weapon. The lab's sterile air hung heavy with tension. A voice cut through the silence. "Wait!" Overlord Thrax's thoughts echoed in Patrick's mind, his alien presence unsettling yet unmistakable. "I can grant you what you seek, human, but my aid comes at a price." Patrick's hand tightened on his weapon. "What are you playing at, Thrax?" The alien's mental voice dripped with urgency. "Thrax's forces approach. I can disable Tartarus's defenses, giving you a window to escape with the weapon's schematics. In exchange, I demand safe passage to neutral space. There are matters I must discuss with your leaders." Patrick's comm crackled. "Multiple hostiles inbound," Rhodes warned. "What's it gonna be, Captain?" Zavala growled. Patrick's lips pursed. "Do it, Thrax. But any tricks and I'll put you down myself." A surge of alien satisfaction flooded Patrick's mind. Alarms blared throughout the facility as Thrax's override took effect. Warning lights bathed the lab in crimson. "Hendricks, get those schematics," Patrick barked. "Rhodes, prep for immediate evac." Hendricks' fingers flew across the console, data streaming into a secured drive. Rhodes's voice crackled over the comm. "Extraction craft secured. We've got a clear shot out of here, for now." The lab doors hissed open. Patrick spun, weapon raised, only to see Zavala dragging an unconscious Thrax. "Couldn't leave our bargaining chip behind," the grizzled veteran grunted. A deafening explosion rocked the facility. "That's our cue!" Patrick shouted. They sprinted through Tartarus's twisting corridors, alarms wailing and emergency bulkheads slamming shut in their wake. Hendricks clutched the data drive to his chest, every step bringing them closer to escape. They rounded a corner and froze. Commander Thrask stood before them, flanked by a squad of heavily armed Breen elites. "Surrender the weapon, Data," Thrask snarled, energy weapon humming with lethal intent. Patrick didn't hesitate. He hurled a flashbang grenade, the blinding explosion giving them precious seconds. "Go!" he roared. The humans surged forward. Zavala and Rhodes laid down suppressing fire, their weapons spitting death at the disoriented Breen. Patrick charged ahead, clearing a path with precise bursts from his rifle. They were meters from the extraction craft when Hendricks cried out. Patrick turned to see his friend stumbling, a smoking hole in his chest, where Thrask's blast had struck true. Time slowed. Patrick saw Hendricks falling, the precious data drive slipping from his grasp. With a primal roar, Patrick lunged forward. He scooped up Hendricks in one arm, snatched the drive with his free hand, and sprinted for the craft. Plasma bolts seared the air around him. Pain exploded across his back as multiple shots found their mark. Patrick's vision swam, but he refused to falter. With a final, desperate lunge, he hurled Hendricks onto the craft's boarding ramp. Patrick stumbled, his legs giving out as more blasts tore into him. Through sheer force of will, he dragged himself aboard, leaving a trail of blood in his wake. Go! Patrick gasped as Zavala slammed the hatch controls. The extraction craft roared to life, Rhodes's piloting skills put to the ultimate test as they dodged flak and turbolaser fire. The vessel shuddered under the onslaught, but held together as they punched through Tartarus's defensive screen and into open space. In the craft's cramped medbay, Patrick cradled Hendrix's broken body. His friend's eyes fluttered open one last time. Did we get it? Hendricks wheezed. Patrick squeezed his hand. We got it. You did good, soldier. A faint smile crossed Hendricks' face as the light faded from his eyes. Silence fell over the craft, broken only by the hum of engines as they raced towards the human flotilla. Patrick's wounds screamed for attention, but he pushed the pain aside. There would be time for grieving later. As they approached the fleet, Patrick opened a comm channel to Admiral Singh's flagship. His voice was raw, but steady. This is Captain Hawthorne. Mission accomplished. We have the schematics. He paused, the weight of their victory settling on his shoulders. But it cost us.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel. And for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.